Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished marketing guru from New York, USA, Mr. Jesse James Wroblewski. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Jesse is the Chief Executive Officer of Supervillain, and he's an author. And all of you know, I've always been very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled Marketing for Supervillains, Diabolical Tips on Differentiation, Decommoditization, and World Domination. So before we start talking, I'm going to encourage all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Jesse's book on Amazon and any other platform that you may be looking at. So Jesse, before we start talking about your book, tell me about your own journey.
Sure. So been running a marketing agency for 25 years. And I think when the pandemic hit, everybody kind of took a step back and did kind of some soul searching. And I wanted to take a step back and do over 25 years, what was not only I most successful at and most enjoyed, but what did I do that made my clients the most money out of anything I did? And it turned out that, taking almost the most boring product that you can have and injecting so much life into it that it was able to stand on its own. So a process of differentiation. I tend to like a little bit of the outside the box things when it comes to creativity. So I decided to go all in and figure out how to successfully decommoditize any business, any product that's on the verge of becoming a commodity, where the owners have to start cutting prices to compete because there's so much competition. Some of that pride that they have when they started their business because they were the only ones that could solve their customers' problems kind of get dwindled away. I wanted to re-inject and get that pride pumping again in their business.
Thank you. So let's talk about your book, Marketing of Supervillains, Diabolical Tips on Differentiation, Decommoditization, and World Domination. But before I ask you specific questions on each of the three Ds, help me understand the three terms from a marketing perspective.
Sure. So differentiation is, a lot of business books out there will tell you to go out and find your USP, your unique selling proposition, or go out and find your differentiator. What makes you different or special according to your prospects? And they leave it at that, right? They don't tell you how to do it. And they don't tell you, after you find it, the monumental task of telling the world why you're different and why that's so important. So I codified how brands throughout history have successfully decommoditized or differentiated themselves, large and small, and kind of walk you through the process of how to do it for yourself.
Okay.
And then decommoditize is kind of a word that I think I created. Microsoft Word kept telling me over and over that it was a spelling error. So I did some research and realized that nobody else had come up with it, so I trademarked it. So I guess I own the word decommoditized, and it's a process of, just like I said, taking the product or service that's on the verge of becoming a commodity, becoming one of a million, and really injecting it with so much life that it stands on its own. There's no more competitors.
Right.
And World Domination. Who doesn't want to dominate the world or dominate their industry? And these are the tactics that you can use to do so.
Correct. Well said. So I'm going to now talk to you about each of the three separately. So let's talk about differentiation. And my first question, since you have 25 years of experience in building brands, what are some common mistakes, Jesse, companies make when trying to differentiate their brands?
I think the biggest mistake is they don't go big enough, right? So they figure out what makes them different, but they don't go all in on it. So they kind of hedge their bets. They get a little, whether it's self-confidence or a little nervousness, but they don't go all in, right? So in the book, I use some examples. Ron Popeil calls himself the salesman of the century. The band Kiss calls themselves the most dangerous band in the world. Howard Stern calls himself the king of all media. And they got those names because they they gave themselves those names, and people just started assuming that Ron Popeil is the salesman of the century.
Right.
Very, very rarely does someone come along and challenge your metrics as to why you're what you say you are. So obviously you want to have integrity and you don't want to lie, but if you want to achieve world domination in your market, figure out what that is and stick to it and raise that flag. Let the world know why you're the best at what you do.
Amazing, amazing. And when you talk differentiation, there is also this other term which is used extensively in marketing, which is don't become a Me Too product.
Correct. Correct.
How does Me Too differ from differentiation?
Yeah, so this was a problem that I faced a long time, being in the marketing industry. You have one agency that says, we'll do your website for X amount of dollars, and we'll do your website for X amount of dollars. Why should I choose you? Well, we're more better, right? We do it more better than the other person.
Yeah.
And the people on the other end of the table, they don't really know what more better means.
Correct.
It's a website and it's a website. So the fact that you may even be better than everyone out there, the customer base really doesn't understand what more better means, or me too, right? So sometimes being the best isn't enough. And that's kind of where the supervillain aspect comes into play, right? So for me, I followed all the rules. I traveled the world. I go to seminars. I refine my skills. I get smarter and better. And I do everything that my competitors doing times 10. But I'm not 10 steps above them. They're kind of neck and neck with me. And like a supervillain, you kind of realize maybe the world's crazy and I'm the only one that can see everything. So that's kind of the concept of the supervillain. If you're doing everything right, but your bank account doesn't reflect that, might be time to, like that supervillain in the movies, that lightning hits and you got to change up the way you do everything.
Well said. And given the kind of technology platforms that are now available, or the digital platforms that are available, how can brands differentiate themselves today compared to what it used to be in the past?
Yeah, so it's kind of a gift and a curse, right? So I think the biggest need for differentiation is all this technology, right? So there's almost no barrier of entry for someone or competitor to enter your field, right? So it's very easy. And we have now an explosion of choice, right? So back in the day, you almost had to know someone that knew someone to get something done. Now, with the click of a button, I can get 100 competitors, I can get proposals from all of them, and I can choose. So it's kind of good and it's kind of bad at the same time. In the book, I have something on my website, which you can download for free, called The Universe of Differentiation. And that is 12 different planets. And it's basically your guide throughout the solar system of differentiation of how all brands throughout the world have successfully differentiated themselves. And chances are, no matter what you do, no matter what you sell, one of these planets, and in most cases, more than one, will be that guiding light, that northern star for you to follow down the path of how to find your differentiator.
Well said. And can differentiation be pushed too far? Where do you think a brand needs to draw the line?
I don't think it can be pushed too far. In the book, I use a case study, the Philips CDI. So Philips came out with a video gaming platform, and they basically said it can do anything. Their tagline was, the only limit is your imagination. It's the imagination machine. And people didn't know what the hell that meant, right? So while they had this incredible technology that was at the front of their industry, they didn't bring it down and they didn't tell people exactly why they were different. They just said, we're almost like a Me Too brand. We're so powerful, you can do anything. Well, I don't know what that means. So I think differentiation, it is great and it's an absolute tool, but you need that messaging to pair with it as well.
Well said. Let's now talk about decommoditization, Jesse. How does decommoditization change a marketing strategy for a brand?
So I think particularly the example that I use is anytime you're entering a market, there's usually a super brand in the market, right? The name brand that everybody knows. And those name brands are kind of like superheroes, right? They have huge public favor. Everybody knows them most of the time. Everybody likes them. They have big muscles, which in marketing equates to big budgets, lots of money. And for you entering that market and trying to outspend them, trying to get everybody to like you as much as they like them, do more social media, more SEO, when you have very little resources, it's a recipe for disaster. So kind of going head to head with a superhero, much like a supervillain, they usually don't have the big muscles in the movies. They have to use their brain to outsmart the superheroes, right? So taking that mentality into your marketing, kind of outsmarting and outwitting the big brands without using tons of money and tons of resources. That's kind of the mantra of the book overall.
Okay, thank you. And how does technology enable or hinder decommoditization of products or services?
So there's a lot of, excuse me, there are a lot of examples, right? And the kind of tentpole example that I use is a brand called Liquid Death. I don't know if you've heard of it, canned water. You know, I use water as the main example. It's the ultimate commodity. You're having some yourself. It's literally everywhere and it's basically free. So how do you charge a premium for something that everyone can get for free? And the path of Liquid Death, using technology, using social media, using all these platforms, was able to create not the best water. They created a lifestyle brand through all the ingenious marketing that they do on all these platforms using these technologies. Now that brand, that Liquid Death can, means something to a small group of people. And that meaning, that lifestyle that they've created is now worth over $500 million.
Wow. Wow. And do you think consumer trends influence the effectiveness of a decommoditization strategy?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, to kind of stay with Liquid Death, their key to success is bucking the trend, right? So if everyone is over here and the trend is saying, hey, we like, you know, water, you know, he calls every water product out there a yoga accessory, right? They all look very eco-friendly. They look like you know, they go right next to your yoga mat. He took it and said, all right, I'm going to take, there's enough people that like this. There's got to be a group of people that absolutely are against everything the market is going for. So sometimes the market trends are important, but going absolutely against the market trend is a great way for you to differentiate yourself.
Okay. And given the amount of work that you've done and the fact that you have you now own decommoditization, what are the risks associated with decommoditization, and how can these risks be mitigated?
So it's a great question. The risks that are associated, and I don't really consider them risks, right? So I think every brand, every product with enough courage has the ability to successfully decommoditize themselves. So you always run into, and the biggest fear, you know, especially when you're niching down on an audience or, you know, creating a lifestyle brand, is, hey, I'm leaving money on the table, right? I'm catering to these people, but there's these people over here with a lot of money. I don't want to, you know, cut them out. And I think that's kind of the biggest danger, is when you start watering down your differentiator to kind of appeal to everyone. We see it a lot in the streetwear category, right? Streetwear comes out, it's very cool. It's only available in like the underground skate shops, and the cool kids wear it. And then all of a sudden they hit that point where they want to scale, and they start showing up in big box stores, Macy's and Walmart. And all of a sudden that cool brand that the cool kids were wearing are like, it's over, you know, everybody else is wearing it. So they're attracted to that money. And look, I understand that you have to scale to be, you're in business to make money. But I think that example of, you know, no longer catering to your core audience is probably the biggest danger with decommoditize, because now you're left with a brand that's kind of middle of the road, doesn't really mean anything to anyone, and it's a recipe for disaster.
And became an also ran.
Yep, yep,
But
yep.
let's now move to the third D, Jesse, which is world domination. What are some of the key components of a strategy aimed at world domination?
So I think without saying it, and it's probably not not politically correct to kind of say it at, in our times, every business, every business out there wants to, to chisel away market share. They want to eat up market share. And every piece, every percentage of market share that you're taking, someone's losing, right? So it's not the most, user-friendly way to think about things. But if you have that in your mindset of, hey, I'm going out and I'm taking acre by acre and mile by mile, I'm eating this up. To kind of go neck and neck with SEO and neck with social media and try and, cut your price $1 and get another. It's a very slow going process where if you differentiate yourself like Liquid Death did, you can come right out of the box, take a huge part of the market and have everybody kind of looking at you and kind of trying to copy what you accomplished. So I think it's almost a shortcut to huge gains in your marketing strategy.
Thank you. And with the now advent or availability of social media, every single brand can aspire to be a global brand.
Absolutely.
Hypothetically. How has the concept of world domination changed from a brand perspective when it comes to social, given the availability of social media?
I think, and again, I think it's a gift and a curse, right? So a lot of brands are on social media because everyone else is on social media and they don't know how to utilize the tool, right? So like building a house, you would never say, hey, I want to use this tool to build the house. You look at the house and you figure out what tools to use. So you don't have to use social media. It's a tool. And if you can't use it correctly, if you don't know how to swing a hammer, chances are your house isn't going to come out the way you want it to be.
Right.
So it is absolutely a tool, and it can be a super incredibly powerful tool, but used incorrectly or used as an afterthought can actually, damage the integrity of your house's foundation and lead to disaster. So I think there are a lot of tools out there. The nice thing about the tool now is it's accessible to everyone. But I'm sure you've seen plenty of disasters because there's no filter. You don't have to consult with an agency and get a strategy. You can just wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and then send out a post.
Absolutely.
And whatever happens, happens. So good and bad. Good and bad.
Well said. I have time for 2 more questions for you, Jesse.
Sure.
The next question is, how can brands maintain their core values while aiming for global market dominance?
Absolutely. So it's kind of a trite saying, and everybody says it, but I don't think anybody knows what it means. And it's authenticity, right? So I personally looked at how to decommoditize myself, and I failed the first 2, 3, 4 times. And it was because I came at it from a logical perspective. I said, this is the industry that has a lot of money. They have a lot of problems that I can fix. And I'm going to become the guru of that industry. And when it came down to it, when I had to write a book about it or write a blog post about it, it was like homework. I didn't want to do it because I really didn't care, right? So if your differentiator can line up what you truly find authentic to yourself, it's really not a question of, can we do this? Should we do this? It's absolutely in line with everything you stand for, your DNA of your brand. And if you're able to find that trajectory, everything you do should automatically line up, and there really shouldn't be any hurdles down the pike of should you or shouldn't you. If it's authentic to you and in the DNA of your brand, all your decisions should be in alignment.
Well said. And my last question to you, given the fact that your book is out in the market, what is one key lesson you want your readers and our viewers and listeners to take away from all the research that you've done in your book?
Absolutely. So I say at the beginning of the book that every brand, every product in the world can be differentiated. And the common misconception is, well, I'm not special. I do accounting like everybody else does. I do, I sell widgets like everybody else does. But if you go back to that example of water,
Mhm.
right? Water for most of the developed world is free. And you may not be selling what you're selling, right? So you can fill up a bucket in the morning before you leave for work with water, and you can carry that around.
Mhm.
When you go out and buy a bottle of water or a can of water, are you buying the water or are you buying the convenience of not carrying around that bucket?
Yeah.
Maybe you have a warm bottle of water in your car and you stop at the service station and you buy a cold bottle of water. Maybe you're buying refrigeration.
Mhm.
So even though you're selling X, your prospects may be getting a different byproduct for what you're selling. So kind of take a step back. Don't necessarily focus, laser focus on what you're selling, but
Mhm.
maybe focus on the byproduct of
Mm.
what your clients experience when they do purchase your product. And rest assured, if someone can sell water and make a $500 million brand, you can absolutely take what you have and figure out your differentiator.
Fabulous lesson. Thank you. And on that note, Jesse, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. Thank you for speaking to me about your book and the 3Ds: differentiation, decommoditization, and world domination. I think I picked up some very interesting points from you. Thank you also for talking about different strategies that can be used by our viewers and listeners to build a brand, and your story of the water, which is managed to not just differentiate or decommoditize, but maybe it's heading towards domination as well. Thank you for speaking
Absolutely.
to me, and good luck to you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.